All right, we should be on air now. If someone on IRC can let us know when you can see us. Welcome to Mark's keynote and QA session. If you have any questions during this, feel free to put them in IRC. Start them with the word question in all caps, and I'll get a nice highlighted list of them that we can go through once he's done with his presentation. All right, let me share that. All right, we should be good to go.
Right, we're off to the races. Hello, everybody. It's great to speak with you again. I'm looking forward to your questions, and I wanted to take a little bit of time just to walk through the two big thrusts of Ubuntu as I see it at the moment. So starting on the desktop, on the client side, at the moment, we're in a really interesting time of dynamism in the Linux desktop world. And I think Ubuntu continues to lead the way in terms of being an open platform for the world's desktops. And so we can call that meme the support all the desktops meme. We have Unity as our default. It continues to show itself to do very well in user testing as a desktop for people who want a crisp, clean, functional, understandable platform. And it's also the basis of our work for Convergence, right? Bringing all of the different personal computing fields together. But we have, I think, very strong communities driving other desktop platforms. And I was very pleased to see that there's a resurgence in interest in bringing Cinnamon, Mate, and various other desktop environments to Ubuntu as first-class remixes as well. I think it's very healthy for us to offer that kind of choice to end users. All of those desktops have things to celebrate about them, and I'd be very glad to support those projects and those initiatives. I want to give some big thanks and kudos to everybody who pulled together for 1404, because I thought all of the desktops were really well represented in in that release. And all of those communities really took the LTS meme to heart. So there was a lot of collaboration around taking advantage of the fact that in the base platform we were doing an LTS to be able to offer users of those desktop environments a longer support commitment. It was great to see each of the different communities stepping up and making their commitments, their respective commitments for 1404. So thank you very much to all of them. In terms of our focus with Unity, all of our energy now for Unity 8 is focused on release to manufacturers. We are focused on providing a version to manufacturers which they can ship. We are showing the first phones in China in the coming weeks, so the very first sort of prototypes that people can hold in their hands and kick the tires on. That's very exciting for us, for the team. And it was great recently to have a spectrum of community app developers participating in one of our Canonical sprints focused on Unity 8 and this push to getting into market with an Ubuntu phone. I want to thank those developers for coming along and for representing the broader community. They brought great energy, and I think they enjoyed the process, just judging from blog posts and so on. The app design story has really come together very beautifully. So I think a key focus for us in the community is to celebrate app design. With the Ubuntu architecture, we can do some unique things in the applications, and the more we do that with our core applications, and the more we do that with community contributed applications, the stronger the sense of having a great platform is going to be. And I think the choices that we've made in terms of the use of the edges, the design memes, and so on are holding together very, very well as we look at the phone, the tablet, and next the desktop. So thank you very much to those community members for coming. Thank you also to the designers who I think have done a really beautiful job of pulling all of these different threads together into a very coherent platform story. And to those of you who are working on your applications, I really hope that you will celebrate that design, both the design of your app, but also the way it fits into the broader system. So there's some great work to be done there. Looking forward towards towards desktop convergence, again, I think all of the foundational pieces are in place now. I spent time with the design team looking through the window management transition, how we bring window management into Unity 8, and how we essentially extend the tablet experience into the desktop. And I think that's come together really beautifully. If I was an app developer, there's an amazingly clean set of primitives now for window management in Unity, and I think that's going to be really classy in its execution. So lots of really great opportunities there. Interestingly, some very major manufacturers have started showing devices that are built on Ubuntu and using Mir, and it's very interesting to speculate how those would evolve over time as we get to full convergence, full platform convergence in Mir. Remember, Unity is just one shell using Mir, but all of the core primitives for window management and so on will be there for anybody else who's building their own shell and wants to do interesting things there. So the client side of things is vibrant. We are actively growing the number of desktops that are supported in Ubuntu. We are actively pushing the envelope in terms of the sorts of devices that are supported in Ubuntu as well. Another very interesting thread in those conversations was taking the technology that we use for the phone for system updates, the system image update mechanism, and the technology that we use for apps and app updates, and bringing that to a wider class of devices. The entire sort of way large organizations build large-scale infrastructure is getting revisited, and we see a lot of interest in bringing Ubuntu into things like switches and routers, Wi-Fi base stations, and so on. And it turns out that a lot of the key pieces that we've built for the phone are going to be really interesting for those other environments and devices as well. There's some incredible work happening on Kickstarter at the moment with people building very cool devices on Ubuntu, and we want to make it really easy for them to do that and get all the benefits that we've provided for the phone ecosystem, where they can get instant updates, automatic transactional updates, atomic updates of both the system and app images. So beyond the desktop, I think you'll see a lot of those core technologies in Ubuntu that were pioneered for the phone becoming available for microservers, for servers themselves, for cloud environments, and for Internet of Things type devices. So lots of very cool stuff there for those of you who are into hackery on the weekends and playing with Arduino or developer boards from different architectures. There's lots of interesting stuff coming there. So moving on to the cloud, I think it's worth restating that cloud is one of those environments where Ubuntu leads very strongly. So we carry some big responsibilities on our shoulders as a community. When we put out updates to our cloud images, those go to a very, very large cross-section of the world's cloud infrastructures and cloud workloads. Something like 60 to 70% of all of the workloads running on the public clouds are running on Ubuntu, and something like 50 to 60% of all of the private clouds built on OpenStack are on Ubuntu as well. So it's a very substantial responsibility that we carry. If I look across the OpenStack ecosystem, Ubuntu clearly stands out as the platform of choice for OpenStack deployments, and that's even more true if you look at the very large deployments. In fact, at the OpenStack Summit recently, they had 8 super user clouds, they were calling them, very large deployments, and 7 of them were all on Ubuntu. So there's a lot of work to be done, and we play a very important role in that ecosystem. And I want to thank everybody who helps shape both the OpenStack packages in Ubuntu, but also the broader environment for cloud users and cloud deployers on Ubuntu. For those of you who don't know, OpenStack fits the Ubuntu release process very, very well. They also have a 6-month cadence. It's nicely lined up with ours. That's no accident. It goes back to the very early days of OpenStack when the core OpenStack developers were all working on Ubuntu. Now, obviously, OpenStack is much wider, much more general, but there is still a lot of overlap in our process and in the OpenStack community. There are, at the moment, 4 different ways that people can get OpenStack on Ubuntu. We package all of the pieces of OpenStack, and because OpenStack moves at quite a fast pace itself with a 6-month cadence, we have a separate set of PPAs, where we publish each incremental release of OpenStack for LTS users. So on LTS, you can always get the latest packages for the latest version of OpenStack. We also recommend Juju charms. The charms for OpenStack are first class. They're all in Python. They handle lots of permutations and combinations of different OpenStack backends and plugins very well. And of course, they give you an elasticity, an ability to shrink and grow your cloud as you need it. We're also building an OpenStack reference install into Landscape, which is Canonical's management platform for Ubuntu. And then there are several partners who've built their own OpenStack solutions on top of Ubuntu as well. So it's a very vibrant ecosystem. There's lots going on. And those of you who haven't yet taken time to build a small OpenStack, I really think you'd be amazed at how lightweight OpenStack can be. You know, it's a big beast of code. It's a huge distributed system. But if you focus on using Juju, using charms, you can actually bring it up very, very cleanly, very easily, and then you can evolve it over time and grow it. So there's lots of interesting stuff happening there. And just to give you some sense of the industry participation, here's a list of companies that are actively using Ubuntu OpenStack. So participating in this is really interesting. You're right at the cutting edge of what the biggest institutions are describing as their next generation infrastructure. So there's huge amounts of really good work going on there. And that's on the back of a whole series of firsts in cloud. In Ubuntu, we were the first to really embrace the public cloud and publish official fresh images. You can find those now on every major cloud. We have the next major cloud due to be announced in a couple of weeks' time. I won't jump the gun on the announcement, but I'm very excited to be continuing to bring the biggest cloud, Ubuntu, to the biggest clouds out there. I think it's really important in our mission to support developers that we are everywhere and that we're fresh everywhere. So that's great and important. We are obviously the first to adopt OpenStack, the first to use KVM as our recommended baked-in hypervisor, first to adopt Ceph, the first to do a lot of work around live migration, which is really important if you're running clouds at scale. Cloud Init is technology that we've pioneered. And right now, the thing that I'm most excited about is containerization, and with that, Linux containers, LXC, which is a substantial community. It is about 60 different companies participating in LXC and Linux containers. But we lead that in Ubuntu. I think 2 of the key developers in LXC work with us full-time. And so Ubuntu really is the best place to break the ice with Linux containers. Those of you who haven't spent an afternoon going through the sort of Linux containers tutorial, step-by-step guide, I really recommend it. It will blow you away. You know, you can boot any Linux distro, you know, in seconds on your laptop, and you can run many containers compared to the number of KVM virtual machines that you can run on a laptop. Obviously, you can't do Windows on LXC. You'd need KVM for that, but you can do any Linux on Linux virtualization essentially in LXC, and it's much faster, much lighter. And it's the basis for things like Docker, which are really important technologies in terms of app distribution and app publication on Ubuntu, but generally on the cloud and in the future of most scale-out type environments. This next picture is the thing that I think is most interesting when we think about how cloud is changing people's practices. If I think of how I got involved with Linux, it was on the server side. It was because I wanted to set up web services and internet services, and Linux was the best way to do that. And today, if you look at the statistics, most people seem to feel that Ubuntu is the best way to do that. So people setting servers up is a key sort of audience for us. But I think what's really important is to look ahead and say, what happens as we scale this up, as infrastructures get bigger and bigger, as it all gets richer and more complex. And the key meme, the key thing is automation. There's this great infographic here which says, how many, this is all about the number of human beings you have and the number of physical servers you have and the ratio of physical servers to human beings in your operation. Now I know at Canonical, we have about 20, 25 people who work on physical servers, and we've got a couple of hundred servers, and then a bunch more virtual servers on top of that. So a fairly decent ratio of machines that we manage to people doing the managing. And obviously we've got lots of complex things going on, so that warrants a certain amount of stewardship. But if you look at the really big guys, the Amazons and the Googles and the Facebooks, the ratio of physical machines to human beings is pretty extraordinary. At Facebook, it's 24,000 to 1. 24,000 to 1. That gives you about 6 seconds per server per person per year. So clearly, automation is critical. And I think we're really pioneering this world. Even at a much smaller scale, all of the interesting systems are distributed systems now. When we first started setting up Linux systems with Debian and Ubuntu, you set up a system on a machine. You might set up a database, or you might set up a web server, or you might set up a database and a web server on a single machine. Today, the really interesting systems, first, they have many more components. So you've got load balancers and app servers and data containers and so on. And second, those components themselves are typically spread out over many machines. And so the architectures of systems today are much richer and much more complex and much more prone to failure and much more operationally challenging than they ever were 10 years ago. And so I think it's really interesting for us to pioneer this field of distributed systems. If I look at what people are actually using Ubuntu to build, they're all distributed systems. And so it's very interesting for us to delve into this and figure out how we can bring that magical Ubuntu touch to distributed systems. We have always been known as a community for figuring out what's important and figuring out how to make that really easy to get, right? And so if we say, well, distributed systems are important, then figuring out how to make those distributed systems really easy to do, that would very much be in keeping with the trails that we've blazed in the past. So Juju is our key kind of push in that regard. Now, we did announce at the recent OpenStack Summit that Juju is being ported to CentOS and to Windows, which is pretty cool, right? It's a piece of open source software that does amazing orchestration. And it will be not tied to Ubuntu in any way. We lead it, but there are now lots of other people coming to that ecosystem. And I think supporting other Linux distributions and Windows is a very, very interesting development. That's been driven by other people who had a need for that, and we're happy to land and merge the patches. But I think it starts to make Juju a more rounded ecosystem, more rounded community, which is great. On the next slide, this is a little picture of the sorts of stuff you can do with Juju. This is the award-winning entry, or the winning entry in a competition that we ran about a year ago to explore what people could do with the existing set of charms that was available. Charms are the individual sort of units of service orchestration that Juju works with. And if you know what this picture is doing, it's pretty amazing. It is it's sort of like an open source Splunk. You can you spin this up at almost any scale on any cloud using Juju, and then you can connect it up to any big system that's generating lots of logs and do really interesting analytics and visualization and searching and querying of those logs through Kibana and Elasticsearch. So there's some pretty sophisticated stuff going on here, and it's quite stunning to people when they see how easily they can get this all up and running. The ecosystem around Juju is growing very nicely. So we talked about Microsoft joining with support for Windows and support for charms of Windows applications. Most of these companies are in the telecommunications space, or they are involved with, they make distributed systems. If you're a company that sells essentially a product that is a distributed system, say it's a Hadoop product or another kind of distributed platform, then having the ability to very quickly spin that up on a cloud for customers for them to evaluate or integrate is really valuable. So a lot of these companies are people who sell distributed solutions, distributed systems solutions, or people who who need to be able to absorb those solutions very, very quickly and efficiently. Our mission statement here is that you should be able to take any software and get it onto any cloud on any architecture. We've shown this working on x86 ARM and PowerPC. We've shown it working on EC2, Azure, OpenStack, Joint, and many other clouds as well. And a key goal for me is that we're able to embrace any kind of new technology that comes along for app delivery or configuration management. So Docker is an example of a sweet new way to deliver an app. We should be able to have a Juju charm that consumes Docker images, and we do. And then all of the different ways that people like to do configuration management are supported in there as well. So you can essentially charm something up using whatever tools you like for handling configuration management or delivering the apps. Could be packaging, if these are charms of things that are in the archives, but it could also be curl if you need to go and fetch the code from revision control or from wherever you deliver your snapshots from. And it's really important that this work on all the clouds and on bare metal and on Vert. So a pretty amazing new ecosystem that's forming, and I want to thank all of the charmers who are so active. There's an amazing amount that you can do today. If you go to jujucharms.com, you can connect and integrate an amazing number of things. A focus for us right now is the field of PaaS, Platform as a Service. I think that there's a whole new set of ecosystems that's going to grow up around PaaS. A lot of the PaaSes today use Ubuntu, so Heroku, Cloud Foundry, Days, and any number of other PaaSes make heavy use of Ubuntu. So we want to support them. We want to help them bring their stuff to the widest possible audience. And the parts that they're made up of are very interesting and reusable parts. As we charm up something like Cloud Foundry, we're also charming up some interesting pieces that other people might like to use as well. Certainly, we've seen with OpenStack that charming OpenStack drove the quality and usability of the charms for all of the middleware pieces, messaging systems and databases and so on, that go into making a big OpenStack deployment. So PaaS is the focus at the moment, as is big data. We are currently working with a variety of folks interested in Hadoop. If you are interested in Hadoop and you want an amazing way to get Hadoop up and running, then this is a push that you want to be involved in. There are 17 different pieces of code from Apache that are interesting and useful. And then, of course, there are all the new HBase equivalents and replacements that are coming along. It would be great to have drop-in pluggable replacements so that you can deploy something with Apache Hadoop, but then also try something with some of the very cool new HBase replacements that we see popping up. That is pretty much it from me. I'd be very keen to take questions, and so I'll hand it back to Michael. Mike, I think you're muted.
Yes, I was. Sorry about that. So we've got quite a few questions. We'll get through as many of them as we can. If you haven't started it with the word question in all caps, then it's probably not going to be on my list. All right, so to start us out, Vassal asks, why didn't you just lock Jono in a basement?
I'm extremely happy for Jono and the move that he's made. I think XPRIZE is a fascinating organization, and he's got a really unique ability to rally people around interesting challenges. So I was delighted for him in that move, and hate to think that I might have anybody locked up in a basement. I'm also delighted with the momentum that we have in the community, and have no doubt that we'll continue that momentum. So thanks for your concern, but I think Jono and I are both relieved that neither of us picked that strategy.
All right. Canary asks, when can I see the Ubuntu phone, the actual hardware?
I think you can see it this week in Shanghai. where the first prototypes of that are being shown. There will be 2 devices, so I'm not sure if both of them are on show, but certainly one of them is in Shanghai this week or next week.
Ziga wants to know, how are we going to ensure that existing desktop applications will continue to be supported in our converged future?
Isn't that an interesting question? So I've got to tell you, I was super excited because during the sprint, I saw gedit running on Unity 8, and it was on Mir, and it was looking pretty sweet. So there are lots of issues and lots of gaps to be closed, but we expect to provide full support for all of the important toolkits, which means you should get all of the apps that you know and love should be there. There's lots of interesting sort of gaps to be closed and problems to be solved. So if that's an interesting problem for you, then climb in and work with the communities, the guys who are nailing that. But I wouldn't say it's quite to the point where it compiles, so we'll ship it. There's definitely stuff to be done, but the first GTK and other toolkit apps are up and running on Mir in a Unity 8 environment, and it's gonna get very interesting from here on out.
Canary again is asking, why don't you create an MOOC for Ubuntu? I'd love to write an application as a very, very normal user. I'm not quite sure what an MOOC is. Are you familiar with that?
I think it's a massive online course, isn't it? Is that a training course that you're referring to?
Canary, if you could give us some additional information on that, we'll come back to you. Seos asks, is Ubuntu more efficient than Windows?
Is it more efficient than Windows? That's a very broad question. I definitely think there are many things that run faster on Ubuntu than run on Windows. I think people have talked about, for example, gaming frame rates. For example, with Steam on Ubuntu outperforming Steam on Windows. So that's very encouraging. I think there'll be areas where Windows is probably more efficient too. So I think that kind of speculation leads us to be smug, and we probably shouldn't do that. We should just focus on the areas where we know we've got room to improve and go and crack on those.
All right. Sidhant asks, what is OpenStack? And I would add, what is our involvement in that? Have we contributed?
Right. What is OpenStack? Well, OpenStack is cloud software. It's software that lets you build a cloud. So imagine if you've got 5 or 10 Linux systems, and instead of going to each of them manually and logging in, what you want to be able to do is you want to be able to go to a web interface and ask for virtual machines on demand, and have those virtual machines created automatically on whichever machine is least loaded or most available or best suits the specific kind of VM that you want to create. OpenStack is the software that does that. So it's a way of taking a cluster of Ubuntu machines or Linux machines and providing a web interface and REST API that you can use to create virtual machines dynamically on demand. So it's a way to build a little cloud out of a cluster of Ubuntu machines. We've been part of OpenStack. We were one of the founding members of OpenStack. We have a bunch of people who work on it. Most of our focus is on production readiness and quality. So we have a good track record in terms of number of bugs fixed in OpenStack. We are less focused on sort of adding features to OpenStack. Our house view is that what's really needed is a deep dive on quality, and that's what we're best placed to do, because the majority of the OpenStack clouds that are in production are on Ubuntu, and so we, through supporting them and addressing the issues that they find, are able to kind of lead the way on making OpenStack production ready. We also do a lot of work on interoperability, right? A key sort of philosophy for us is that there shouldn't just be one stack. We want to support many different vendors. I deleted a slide on the number of vendors that are currently integrated with us, but it's up to 18 now in 6 months who joined a program called OIL, the OpenStack Interop Lab that we lead. And all of those vendors are writing Juju charms, so you can build a cloud very quickly and efficiently using their components, mixing and matching their components. It's pretty cool. If you haven't played with OpenStack and you have a couple of machines sort of spare, then you can build an OpenStack very easily with Juju Charms. In fact, in the next couple of months, we'll publish a tool that will let you, with a single command, build that little cloud. And we are also going to publish a way for you to take a single machine and turn it into a cloud using exactly the same charms. So a really efficient way to kind of just hack on OpenStack yourself. It's very cool stuff. Take a look.
All right. D. Shimmer wants to know, does the cloud and OpenStack development lead to revenue streams, and how? Is it support contracts, licensing, or paid development?
Our OpenStack work is commercial, so if you think of the biggest OpenStack deployments that have announced so far, most of them, the vast majority of them, are on Ubuntu, and most of them are commercially engaging either us or one of our partners, and through the partner us, for support, so that we can help them make that cloud both efficient. We understand a lot about how you best architect those clouds, and also support it. There are lots of little issues that creep up when you're exercising Ubuntu and Linux in this way, and so many people do choose to have a commercial engagement with us. All of the charms are open source. Juju itself is open source. All of the packages are open source. Our customers do get access to Landscape, which is the management solution, which will do a whole bunch of automated things, keeping the cloud up to date, and it will even build the cloud to a very high standard reference architecture that we maintain. As well. So there are some features that we make available just to customers, but all of the primitives, all of the charms, all of the packages are open source free software.
All right, changing topic a little bit here, we have a question. Are there any design mockups for the new Converged Unity 8 desktop? You were speaking about your conversation with the design team earlier.
There aren't, but I think Unity 7 reflects fairly clearly the mechanics. There'll be some changes to the way we do things like workspaces and app switching because of convergence. We have some new mechanisms there with the right edge and the fan display and so on for app switching, which will be relevant for Unity 8 on the desktop. But the core ideas of where everything are laid out, those aren't changing very much between Unity 7, which is what we currently have, and Unity 8. A lot of the work that we did in Unity 7 was to test and exercise some of those layout propositions, and we're pretty happy with how everything fits together. If you look at the phone and then stretch that to the tablet, then stretch that to your current desktop, it gives you a really clean idea of how all the pieces fit together.
Okay, the next two questions are kind of similar, so I'm going to merge them into one, and that is, can we expect a return to Ubuntu One Cloud Sync service, or is there anything planned to replace that?
No, I think we've established that there are really good options out there from a bunch of different companies, Dropbox, Google, Box, and others. And those companies are operating at a scale that makes them a better option for a user of Ubuntu than Ubuntu One would be. I think we built some really unique experience. I talked about distributed systems earlier. Distributed systems at scale are challenging, are hard. We had a petabyte odd of storage that we're managing as part of Ubuntu One. And it really exercised a lot of it helped us shape a lot of what we think about large-scale distributed systems today. So I'm very glad that we did it. And our goal now is to make it easy for people to transition to commercial offerings from a very large ecosystem of providers. I don't think we will return to that as a market.
Okay. I Needed Nick asks what I think is a very interesting question, is how will Ubuntu prevent fragmentation that is a problem with Android?
So if you're interested in that, then you're interested in our mechanisms for image updates. Every single Ubuntu phone device and tablet device will have exactly the same core image. all the same versions, all the same libraries, all the same core apps will all be there. Carriers will be able to add applications. They'll be able to add scopes, which show up as sort of the default experience on the home page. But all of that is configurable by you, the user, as well. So carriers are essentially doing things, that you yourself could do and which you can undo. And that's a very strong principle that we've held out and which has been accepted by all of our carrier partners. So that makes Ubuntu a much cleaner, much tighter, much more crisply defined platform than Android is. All of those parts are open source. If you want to take them and go and make your own platform, you certainly can. But the average Ubuntu device across all manufacturers, across all operators, will have exactly the same core system image. And when we push an update, that update will be available to everybody equally.
All right. The next question is, will being a gamer on Ubuntu be less of a limiting factor anytime soon? I gather that's probably related to the Steam support now that we have.
I'm not sure how I can answer that. I think my understanding is that Steam on Ubuntu is as good as Steam on any other platform. As good on any other Linux as any other Linux platform. And the catalog of games is pretty impressive. I think we're up to 300 or so games in Steam on Linux, which is pretty fantastic. So if you have specific requests and so on, and you're willing to put your money where your mouth is, then I think knocking on Steam's door, that'll be well received.
D. Shimmer asks, when you talk about partners, what might that mean for a practical basis? What are some hypothetical examples of what a partnership between Canonical and another major player may mean in everyday life?
Well, so for example, we just announced a partnership with Mirantis. They have their own OpenStack solution, which they are willing to install on Ubuntu and support on Ubuntu. And in that environment, we will support Ubuntu both below and above the line, essentially. We will support Ubuntu as the host OS, and also in cases where people are using Ubuntu as a guest, we'll support that. So we're working with them and their OpenStack distribution, as well as having our own OpenStack distribution. And there are quite a lot of companies that are doing that. MetaCloud is another one. Cisco has an OpenStack distribution that uses Ubuntu. And so I think we've been the most open Linux platform to such partnerships, and giving people the most choice as to the number of ways they can consume OpenStack on Ubuntu.
All right. The next one is, will Unity 8 replace Unity 7 on Utopic Unicorn, or will it be an optional testbed?
It's definitely not going to replace Unity 7 on Utopic, but it will be possible to have a play with it on Utopic, and I think that's going to be very cool. So, so look out for that, and it should be pretty easy to have it as a separate sort of desktop session that you can log into occasionally. If you have a touchscreen laptop, that's going to be a pretty interesting experience, although it's not our sort of core focus for the cycle. There are lots of folks who are passionate about making that happen.
And there is a session, I believe, tomorrow or Thursday about how we're going to provide that session. D. Shimmer again is asking, as an everyday desktop-only user, what are the most important technologies or systems in the hottest ecosystems, mobile or cloud, that will benefit me as they trickle down?
So were you talking about ecosystems on the back end or on the front end?
I think he means stuff on the back end and how that will benefit him.
I think the really interesting story on the back end is the speed at which people are moving to scale out. When Linux first broke into the sort of commercial environment, it was very much about running a database or running a single system very well. Now it's this challenge of running tens, hundreds, thousands of systems very effectively. So most of the gene pool for that work is happening on the public cloud. Obviously, there are a bunch of key clouds, EC2. I would not rule out Azure. I think the Microsoft team have done a very credible job of building a platform-neutral cloud infrastructure. and we continue to see performance and scale improvements happening there. Rackspace, HP Cloud coming on strong. OpenStack making it much easier for other people to create new entrants to the cloud market. So you'll see a lot more specialized clouds emerging as OpenStack matures. Now, layered on top of that, I think the key big ecosystems now are big data, because all of these distributed systems are generating data at a tremendous rate, and potentially platform as a service. Although platform as a service, as a percentage of the number of workloads out there remains pretty small, it's very interesting from a developer experience point of view. So all of those ecosystems are interesting. Right now, I think the most interesting for me is the big data one. It's sort of incredible how it changes the way you think as you start to be able to work with large amounts of data. That has been very difficult to do. Setting up Hadoop, setting up these big infrastructures has been very challenging. But Juju is making it really, really easy to do. And I think we're going to unleash a lot of creativity and innovation in that regard.
So that leads us kind of into the next question. Is there any benefit to Canonical by supporting more platforms on the cloud front?
Yes, I think so. I believe in open ecosystems, and it was a bit of an awkwardness for us that Juju was only supporting Ubuntu as a platform. That wasn't an awkwardness by design. It was an awkwardness by racing fast to get the interesting features added on the platforms that you have access to and care about. And I think it took a little while for people to understand just how interesting Juju is, and for other communities to start to sort of get interested. I was really delighted when the Windows code was offered to us. It came as a very nice surprise, and we're very happy to be integrating it. But equally so with CentOS, and in fact we're going to go a little further with CentOS. We're actually going to publish CentOS images to make it easy for people to use Juju and CentOS together. Because CentOS is an important platform. It's fairly widely used for older workloads which grew up in a different era. I think most of the scale-out distributed workloads are already on Ubuntu, but some of those may be on CentOS too, or people may have a preference for them. So I think it's good for us to stand behind the promise of openness. We do that on the desktop by supporting other people's desktop environments, right? And we do that on the cloud by doing what we can to support interoperability between different platforms, both Linux and other environments as well.
Right, so this next one is a little bit vague, but we'll see what we can do. How will Ubuntu Touch cater to the needs of Android users?
That's interesting. I think there's some really interesting work we can do to make Android applications easily available and consumable on Ubuntu. They will always be a bit limited because Android doesn't make the same sort of clean promises about how you can use the system. They have buttons and various other things that they have to sort of fudge into the interface. But I think it should be possible for Android developers to get their application onto Ubuntu really easily. And so we have a couple of different threads involved on exploring how to make that a great experience for those developers. Otherwise, for Android users, if you love Android, I think that's great. You might want to explore a broader Linux ecosystem. You might want to explore that convergence idea. I think it's very, very interesting, very powerful. Perhaps Android will do that too. But from a design point of view, I think we have a really, really beautiful starting position in that game. Pritz0601 asks, the phone page on the Ubuntu website says Facebook, Twitter, Dropbox, Evernote, and Amazon will be available at launch. Does this mean native Ubuntu SDK apps? And if so, how much progress has been made on this front? Some of those apps are native. Where they provide an API that we can talk to, it's pretty straightforward for us or our community to make a native application. Others will be HTML5 applications. And that's why we've put so much work into the HTML5 app framework, and we've done really well there. It's amazingly smooth now. and from a performance point of view. And we picked components that other key industry partners seem to be picking as well. So we have, we were the first to say we were going to be all WebKit, Blink, and Cordoba. And that seems to be a platform that the Chrome web apps are focused on as well. So I think you'll see a really good experience for HTML5 on Ubuntu. The apps will be as good as they are on Android or iOS.
All right. The next question is, how is Ubuntu Gnome doing, and will there be a future for it?
Well, I think that community has done really well. The Ubuntu Gnome guys have stepped up. They're passionate about Gnome, and I hope they feel that we've made the appropriate space and supporting infrastructure available for them to excel. I think they've taken choices very, very appropriately. You know, this last release was an LTS, and they've treated it like an LTS. So I think that's really important that GNOME users have access to an LTS as well as the sort of latest and greatest code. So I'm quite proud of the work that they've done and the work that we've done to support that community, and hope they continue.
All right. I Need a Nick asks, is the recent release of OS X Yosemite a thing of concern for Ubuntu?
No, not at all. I don't think we can focus too much on what other platforms do. I think there's beautiful work in Yosemite and iOS. I think there's interesting and great work in Android and in Windows. You know, I don't think we get stronger by worrying too much or by dissing the work of other platforms. I think credibly over the last couple of years we showed an ability to lead in some areas, and I've got to respect the leadership and admire the work of others when it's great. You know.
All right, Vasil again with the important questions. Why did you name it Unicorn?
Well, U comes around once every 13 years. Don't you think we should take the shot?
All right, next one. Can you please make a homepage where users can submit what hardware can be used in Ubuntu?
I think if you just Google Ubuntu certified hardware, you find a list. And if you want to contribute to that list, I think it might be, if you go to ubuntu.com/certification, you see our current sort of list. If you want to contribute to that list, I guess you could do it on a wiki page, but I think that list over there represents the stuff that we've actually tested and committed to keep working.
Okay, Juliet is asking, I'm not sure if you would know this or not, but will the BQ phone have 4 CPU cores or 8?
That's not something I have an immediate answer to hand on. I know that it'll be dual SIM, which is quite a cool feature, but I don't know about its core count.
The Illusionist wants to know if you would visit Tunisia.
Well, I was actually in Tunisia a little while ago. Had a great opportunity to visit, and was really impressed with the vibrancy of the Linux and Ubuntu communities there. But I don't have any current plans to visit.
The next one, will Mir get support for Nvidia and ATI to satisfy the growing Linux gaming market?
Yes, we are working with all of the major vendors, and we're aligning around key standards for OpenGL and video device memory sharing and access. So I'm pretty confident that we'll have first-class support both for their mobile and their desktop platforms. I did get an answer from our lead on the phone integration side of things, saying that the BQ device is a quad-core CPU. Thanks, Victor.
All right, Box Tropica asks, will LibreOffice be available on every form factor?
Yes, I think we will have a compatibility strategy for applications like LibreOffice. I don't want to jump the gun on that. First class, obviously, is to get support for the LibreOffice toolkit or for Mir into the LibreOffice toolkit, because then they can take full advantage of the full precision of the windowing mechanisms that we're putting in place there. And I know that a lot of the sort of niggling concerns that people have with LibreOffice on X will be solved if they use the native mere windowing mechanism. But you know, as a bridge mechanism, we'll have some backward compatibility mechanisms there too.
All right, here's a question we've been getting for about a year now. Is there any chance that the Ubuntu Edge will be released?
No, that project is shelved, unfortunately. I think it was a pioneering, you know, trailblazing effort, and it's interesting to see how many of the cool attributes of the Edge are now showing up in mainstream hardware. I am very interested to see what Apple does with their supply line of Sapphire screens, and very interested to see what people do with the sort of next generation of GPUs and CPUs, which really are desktop class. So you know, right now we've concentrated all of our efforts on making a great software platform for that next wave of hardware. We won't do a physical device.
All right, I'm going to try and get through some of the more interesting questions that we have left since we're running out of time. DC Williams asked, do you see Canonical placing a focused effort on enterprise adoption with OpenStack over the next 18 months?
Yes, very much so. You know, Ubuntu is already amazingly prevalent in enterprise environments, amazingly prevalent. But it's never really got the attention of the CIO. But because of our strong presence in the OpenStack ecosystem, people are now able to take all of the Ubuntu that they're doing already in the enterprise environment and essentially declare it and say, hey, these are all the places we're already using Ubuntu. So it makes sense potentially for us to use it for this next bit of infrastructure. So OpenStack has turned into a sort of an awareness, a driver of awareness at the highest levels in enterprises of the important role that Ubuntu is already playing in enterprise Linux. I don't think OpenStack is the only story there, though. I mean, even without OpenStack, if I look at large financial institutions, media institutions, and other enterprises, and I look at what they're doing on public clouds, on Azure or on EC2 or on Rackspace, many of them use Ubuntu, and they actually shift to Ubuntu as they shift to the cloud. There are lots of things that we've done in Ubuntu that make it really sweet for public cloud usage. And obviously there's a huge developer ecosystem around Ubuntu on those public clouds. So OpenStack is one part of it, but I think the public cloud is equally important in raising awareness of Ubuntu in enterprise environments.
All right. Cheryl asks, are the charms provided from Microsoft also open source?
The charms provided, well, different charms. Oh, sorry, got a third-party participation over here. Different charms are going to be under different licenses. We don't own the charms, so vendors might have proprietary charms. They might have open source charms. You might have proprietary charms of open source. You might have open source charms of proprietary software. In the case of Microsoft applications, I suspect the charms will sometimes be open source, but obviously the underlying apps that they're installing are likely to be proprietary. That said, there are going to be open source charms of open source software on Windows. Certainly, for example, the OpenStack components that you can run on Windows will be charmed, and those will be open source charms. So there's pretty cool work happening there. I hope it'll grow into a flourishing ecosystem. And I would just think of charms as software, you know. There'll be software under different licenses. There'll be charms under different licenses. And those charms belong to those vendors, so you know they will set an appropriate license for their work.
All right. Maestro is asking, how is Ubuntu doing in China? What's the latest news?
So Ubuntu Qilin has had multiple million downloads, I believe. So they've had a very strong reception in terms of people downloading and using it. There's a lot of work being done on Ubuntu Qilin, both for back-end infrastructure usage and also for desktop usage. The Qilin guys want to pursue some new user interface ideas, so they'll be investing in that, and we will support their efforts. You know, to us, that's just another desktop environment, essentially. You know, I'm delighted to see them going from strength to strength.
All right. Juliet is asking, is Canonical worried about Chromebooks?
I think Chromebooks are a really interesting phenomenon in the PC space. I think that they, the web is a very central application, so it makes sense that there should be web-oriented terminals and devices out there. And Google's obviously a super competent organization. There are lots of opportunities for us to work with that team. So, for example, Chrome on Mir has been a key area of focus for us, and I think having a good relationship with the Chrome team generally is important. As for whether we're worried about it, I think it's, I think Chrome is one of those sort of existential propositions. If the web is the only platform that matters on the client, then Chrome is going to be a wonderful way to do the web, right? So if in fact the web eats everything, well then kudos and congratulations to the Chrome guys. And possibly we'll see other web sort of based platforms, but they will certainly, go down in history as having pioneered that. If in fact there's room for diverse native clients and so on, then I think more open, more traditional platforms continue to play a role. So, I think in life one doesn't sort of really sweat about the existential things too much unless you have a way to do something about it. So from my part, it's, I kind of celebrate Chrome's growth because it helps drive vendor support for Linux drivers, for graphics drivers, for sound and Wi-Fi and all of those sorts of things. So I'm a little bit grateful for every Chromebook that ships. I'm a little bit more grateful for every Ubuntu notebook that ships, and there are many tens of millions of those. So that's how I would frame it. Michael, we're on the hour. What do you think?
Yep. I think we will go ahead and call it. There are far too many questions to get through them all. So thank you, everyone, for asking the questions. If we didn't get to yours, there are lots of sessions going on the rest of today, tomorrow, and Thursday where you can probably get them answered. Thank you, Mark, for coming on and answering all of our questions.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you, everybody. This was a lot of fun.
All right. Thank you.